You are standing in a used car lot on a gray afternoon, looking down at some low little hatchback, and you are quietly wondering how on earth your knees are supposed to fold down into that thing. I stood in exactly that spot 2 winters ago. My lower back gave me the answer before my brain did. Here is the truth I stumbled onto, and it still surprises me. 6 of the best SUVs for older drivers in Britain are sitting unsold right now, going for dirt cheap money, and the reason almost nobody is buying them has nothing to do with how good they are. I very nearly walked past every single one of them myself, and I walked past them for the dumbest reason there is: a badge. Stay with me, because by the end I am going to hand you the one measurement that decides everything, the number no salesman ever says out loud. The number that decides whether you slide into a car easily at 70 or 75, or whether you fight it every single day until you just stop going out. I found that number buried in ergonomics research out of Loughborough University, and once you know it, you will never look at a car the same way again. And the best part is this: every car I am about to name is probably sitting on a forecourt within 20 miles of you right now. I remember the exact moment this whole thing started for me. It was a Tuesday, in a supermarket car park in Leicester, and my father, who was 81 at the time, was gripping the top of the doorframe of my low silver saloon, trying to haul himself up and out. He had done it 1,000 times without thinking. That day he could not do it without help. He did not say anything. He just went quiet and looked embarrassed, and that silence stayed with me for weeks. I told myself I would sort it. I told myself I would buy him something sensible, something that let him keep his freedom. So I did what most of us do. I assumed the answer was expensive. I assumed a car that was easy to get in and out of, sat up high, had light steering and good visibility, would cost a fortune, because that is what we have all been trained to believe. The truth turned out to be almost the opposite, and figuring that out took me the better part of a year, a lot of test drives, and more than a few arguments with car dealers who clearly wished I would leave. Let me start with the car that changed my mind completely, because it is the one I laughed at first. The Suzuki Vitara, and its slightly bigger brother, the S-Cross. Now, when I first saw the price of a clean used Vitara, something like £5,000 to £7,000 for a tidy example only a few years old, my instinct was suspicion. Cheap usually means trouble. I was wrong, and I was wrong in a way that taught me something. Here is what nobody tells you about the Vitara. The seat height sits in that sweet spot where you do not drop down into it, and you do not climb up into it either. You sort of turn and sit, the way you would sit into a kitchen chair. The first time my father tried one on the forecourt, he got in, and then he got out, and then he did it again without saying a word, and I knew. Suzuki has quietly been building light, simple, tough little vehicles since the 1970s, and their engineering philosophy has always been to keep things small and honest, rather than heavy and complicated. The steering is light. The visibility out of the front and sides is genuinely excellent because the windows are big and the pillars are thin, which matters enormously when your neck does not swivel like it used to. And here is why it is cheap. It carries a Suzuki badge, not a German one, and in this country we have been quietly taught for 40 years that a badge from Stuttgart is worth thousands more than a badge from Hamamatsu, regardless of what the car actually does. That belief is costing older drivers a small fortune, and I will come back to exactly who profits from it, because it made me genuinely angry once I understood the full picture. But the Vitara raised a bigger question in my mind, and it is the question that drove the rest of my search. If a car this good could be sitting unloved and underpriced purely because of snobbery, then what else was I missing? That question led me straight to the second car, the Hyundai EX35, and this one taught me about reliability in a way I did not expect. The EX35 was sold in Britain from around 2010 to 2015, and you can now pick up a good one for somewhere between £3,000 and £5,000, £3,000, for a proper, roomy, high-seated family SUV with a warranty history most cars would envy. I was deeply skeptical, so I did what the skeptic in me always does. I went digging into the data instead of trusting the showroom. Hyundai started offering a 5-year unlimited mileage warranty in the United Kingdom back in 2010, and they did that for a very specific reason. They knew their cars had become genuinely dependable, and they were willing to bet money on it, because a warranty is a company putting its own cash where its mouth is. When I looked at owner reliability surveys, the EX35 kept scoring far higher than cars costing twice as much. The doors open wide, closed to 90 degrees, which is the single most underrated feature for an older driver, because a wide door opening is the difference between swinging your legs in comfortably and scraping your shin every time. I took my father to sit in one, and the thing he noticed was the height of the boot floor. He could load his shopping without bending double. Such a small thing, such a huge thing when your spine is 80 years old. Now here is where the tension started building for me, because I realized these were not flukes. I was finding a pattern, and the pattern pointed at something uncomfortable. Someone had been quietly steering people like my father, and probably people like you, away from exactly the cars that suited them best. But I am getting ahead of myself, because the third car is the one that made me stop and genuinely question everything I thought I knew about what a good car even is. The third car is the Kia Sportage, the version sold from roughly 2010 to 2015. And I want you to understand something about Kia before you dismiss it, because I dismissed it and I was a fool to. Kia was for years treated as a joke in this country. A bargain basement badge for people who could not afford anything better. That reputation was earned in the 1990s, and it stopped being true well over a decade ago. But reputations linger long after the facts change, and that lag is where the bargains live. Here is the buried detail that flipped me. In 2007, Kia hired a man named Peter Schreier, one of the most respected car designers in the world, the man who had shaped some of the most desirable European cars of his generation. From that point on, Kia was building cars to a completely different standard, and the Sportage from that era drives tight, feels solid, and lasts. You can find them now for £4,000 to £6,000, and they come with the same long warranty philosophy, which means many of them were dealer-maintained on a proper schedule, and a full service history on a cheap car is worth its weight in gold. For an older driver, the Sportage does 3 things beautifully. The seat is high enough to slide onto rather than fall into. The dashboard controls are large, physical buttons, not a fiddly touchscreen that makes you take your eyes off the road, and I cannot stress enough how much that matters as reactions slow. And the ride is soft enough to soak up potholes without jarring an old back on every bump. My father sat in the Sportage, adjusted the seat, put his hands on the wheel, and said something I will never forget. He said, "This feels like a car they made for a person, not for a magazine." And that is exactly it. That is the whole thing in one sentence. But it was right around this point in my search that I finally understood why these cars were so cheap, and it stopped being funny and started making me genuinely cross. Because the reason is not quality, the reason is a game, and the game is played with your money. Let me explain what I found, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. When a brand new car is sold, the biggest chunk of money is not made on the metal. It is made on the finance, the markup, and the depreciation, and the whole industry is built on convincing you that a car is only respectable for the first 3 or 4 years of its life. After that, the value falls off a cliff, especially for the so-called lesser badges, and that cliff is not an accident. It is manufactured. It is marketing. Depreciation is the single largest cost of owning a car, larger than fuel, larger than insurance, larger than repairs, and yet it is the cost nobody ever talks about in the showroom, because the showroom is the place that profits from it. Here is the part that made me angry on my father's behalf. Older drivers, the very people who most need a high, easy, reliable, sensibly sized car, and who very often have the least money to waste, are the exact people being pushed toward either an expensive new car on finance they do not need, or a low, cramped little hatchback because that is what fits a tight budget when you only shop by price and badge. Nobody is telling them that a 4-year-old Korean or Japanese SUV, bought outright for a few £1,000s, ticks every single box better than either option. Nobody is telling them, because there is no profit in telling them. And that brings me to something I know some of you are thinking right now, because I thought it too. You might be sitting there saying, "This is all very well, but I do not have £5,000 spare, and I do not have a mechanic friend, and I would not know a good car from a bad one if it drove over my foot." I want to speak directly to you for the next few minutes, because this next part is the part I wish somebody had explained to me before I wasted money learning it the hard way, and you do not need any special knowledge or any special purchase to use it. Here is what I learned to do, and you can do it this weekend with nothing but your own body and a phone you already own. When you go to look at any used car, before you even start the engine, do the sitting test. Open the driver's door as wide as it will go, and just sit down into the seat the way you naturally would. If you have to drop down and then struggle to rise, walk away, no matter how cheap it is. If you turn, sit, and stand back up without pushing off the door frame, that car will keep your independence for years. Do this 3 or 4 times. Your body will tell you the truth long before your eyes do. Then, take your phone, and while you are sitting in the driver's seat, take a photo looking over each shoulder, the way you would when reversing. Look at that photo. If you can see clearly out of the back and the sides, brilliant. If the car has thick pillars and tiny windows and huge blind spots, that is a car that will frighten you at junctions and eventually stop you driving at all. This costs nothing. It takes 2 minutes, and it tells you more than any glossy brochure ever will. One more, and this one saved me hundreds of pounds. Before you go, take down the registration and run the free basic vehicle check on the government website, the official one, gov.uk, which tells you the car's MOT history for nothing. You can see every advisory, every failure, every reading of the mileage over the years, all recorded by law. If the mileage jumps around or goes backwards, walk away. If the same fault keeps being flagged and never fixed, walk away. That record is public, it is free, it is legally required, and almost nobody bothers to look at it. You do not need to be an expert, you just need to read. So you see, you do not need money, you do not have to do this properly. You need patience, and you need to know what to look for, and now you do. And here is the thing that keeps me up at night on behalf of drivers like you. That sitting test tells you if one car fits your body today, but it does not tell you whether that car is about to lose thousands off its value while it sits on your driveway, or which badges are quietly running out of road and dragging their prices down with them. That is the whole other half of this game, and it is exactly what I put into my book, The Complete Dead Metal System. It is the only structured system that shows you exactly what to sell, what to hold, what to exit, and what to avoid before 2026 breaks your finances. Inside you get the truth about the £10,000 myth most drivers still believe, which brands are sinking and taking your money with them, the engine failure scandal your dealer will never mention, and a 12-month roadmap with real decision templates and real loss scenarios, so you never make a costly mistake blind. And here is something you can check tonight, for free, before you trust a word I say. Pick any one of the 6 cars I have named, look up what a tidy one sold for 3 years ago, and then look up what it sells for now, and watch which badges held their value, and which ones fell off a cliff. You will see the pattern with your own eyes in 10 minutes. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description, or the pinned comment. And this matters right now because depreciation is not waiting for anyone. Every month you own the wrong car, it is quietly costing you money you cannot get back. Which brings me back to the cars, because I still owe you 3 more, and the 4th one is the one that took me the longest to take seriously. The 4th car is the Mitsubishi ASX. And I will be honest with you, this is a car that Britain has almost entirely forgotten, which is precisely why it is such a steal. You can find a clean, well-kept ASX for £3,000 to £5,000, and people walk straight past them on the forecourt because the name does not excite anyone at a dinner party. But excitement is not what an older driver needs. What an older driver needs is a car that starts every single morning, that costs almost nothing to insure, and that you can see out of in every direction, and the ASX does all three. Mitsubishi built their reputation on tough, dependable, no-nonsense engineering, and they have been selling vehicles in Britain since the 1970s under one name or another. The ASX has a high glass house, which is the technical term for lots of window and a light, airy cabin, and that means fantastic all-round vision. The seats are high and upright, the controls are simple, and the running costs are low, because parts are cheap and the mechanicals are simple enough that any local independent garage can fix them without special equipment. That last point matters more than people realize, because a car that only a main dealer can touch will bleed you dry, whereas a simple, honest car can be kept alive for pennies by the fellow down the road. But the ASX did something else for me. It made me realize that the very thing making these cars unfashionable, their plainness, their lack of glamour, was the exact thing that made them perfect. And that realization led me straight to the strangest and most surprising car on my whole list. The fifth car is the SsangYong, and yes, I know, most people cannot even pronounce it, and that is the whole point. SsangYong is a Korean maker most Brits have never heard of, and their SUVs, the Korando in particular, are among the most staggering bargains in the entire used market. We are talking about a genuinely spacious, high-riding, comfortable SUV for £2,000 to £4,000, sometimes even less, and the reason is pure unfamiliarity. Nobody knows the name, so nobody wants it, so the price collapses, and that collapse is your opportunity. Now, I was as skeptical as anyone. I assumed an unknown badge meant a bad car, so I looked into them properly, and here is what I found. SsangYong has been building vehicles since the 954, let me be precise, since the mid-1950s, making them one of the oldest car makers in Korea, and for years many of their engines and parts were built under license from Mercedes-Benz. Read that again. Mercedes engineering, in a car that costs less than a decent second-hand Caravan. The Korando is roomy, the doors are big, the seats are high and supportive, and the boot is enormous, which is a gift when you are lifting a mobility aid or a week's shopping. The thing that sold me was the space. My father is not a small man, and in a lot of modern cars he felt boxed in, hunched, cramped at the shoulders. In the Korando he sat up straight with room to spare, and he could get his walking stick in and out of the door without a fight. £2,000 for that. It felt almost illegal. And that finally brings me to the sixth car, and then to the one measurement I promised you at the very beginning, the number from that Loughborough research that pulls this whole thing together. The sixth car is the Dacia Duster, and this one is the ultimate example of everything I have been telling you. Dacia is owned by Renault, built on proven Renault mechanicals, and sold at rock-bottom prices, because Dacia's entire business model is to strip out the fashion and the fluff and sell you honest metal for the least possible money. A used Duster can be had for £4,000 to £6,000, sometimes less, and it gives you a high driving position, huge visibility, simple physical controls, and mechanical parts shared with millions of Renaults, which means cheap, easy repairs anywhere in the country. The Duster is not pretty and it is not posh, and Dacia does not pretend otherwise, and I have grown to love it for that honesty. It does exactly what an older driver needs and not one thing more. You sit up high, you see out easily, you get in without a struggle. It costs almost nothing to run. And when something wears out, as things do, you fix it for a fraction of what a fashionable badge would charge you. So there they are, 6 cars. The Suzuki Vitara, the Hyundai EX35, the Kia Sportage, the Mitsubishi ASX, the SsangYong Korando, and the Dacia Duster. 6 SUVs sitting unloved and underpriced on forecourts across Britain right now, every one of them better suited to an older driver than most of what the showrooms are pushing, and every one of them cheap for reasons that have nothing to do with how good they are. But I promised you a secret, and I am a man who keeps his word, so here it is, and this is the part I want you to remember. long after you have forgotten the 6 names. When I was deep in this whole obsession, I found my way into research on vehicle ergonomics, the actual science of how a human body gets into and out of a car, and a good deal of the serious work in this country has come out of Loughborough University, which has one of the most respected human sciences and design ergonomics programs in Europe, going back decades. And buried in that field is a concept that the entire car-buying public has never heard of, but that quietly decides everything for an aging body. It is called the hip point, or the H-point, and it is simply the height of your hip joint above the road when you are sitting in the driver's seat. Here is the secret, and it is beautifully simple. There is a sweet spot for that height, and the sweet spot is roughly the same as the height of an ordinary dining chair, somewhere around 17 to 19 inches off the ground. When the seat is that high, you do not drop down into the car, which is what wrecks knees and hips, and you do not have to climb up into it, which is what strains shoulders and backs. You simply turn and sit, and later you stand, using the same muscles you use to get out of a kitchen chair a dozen times a day without even thinking. Too low, like a saloon or a sports car, and every single journey ends with a struggle to rise. Too high, like a big rugged off-roader, and you have to haul yourself up, which is just as bad in the other direction. That middle band is the magic, and it is exactly where all 6 of the cars I have named happen to sit, not by accident, but because they were designed around ordinary human bodies rather than around looking dramatic in a photograph. And here is how you use it this weekend, for free. Forget the badge, forget the age, forget even the price for 1 minute. Go and sit in the car, and if getting in and standing back up feels exactly like sitting down at your own dinner table and getting up again, that is the car. That single test, that one comparison, is worth more than every review and every brochure ever written, because it is measured against the one thing that actually matters, which is your own body, today, as it is. The salesman will talk about horsepower and trim levels and infotainment. Not one of them will mention the hip point, because the hip point cannot be upsold, and it does not appear on any price list, and it quietly points you toward the cheap, sensible car instead of the expensive, flashy one. This knowledge existed all along. It sat in university research and in the notebooks of the engineers who designed these humble cars. It got buried under decades of marketing that taught us to want the wrong things for the wrong reasons. But it never went away, and now it is yours, and you can carry it into any car lot in the country and use it in about 30 seconds. My father drove a car I chose using exactly this test for the last years he was able to drive, and he kept his independence, his dignity, and his Tuesday trips to that same supermarket car park in Leicester, right to the end. That is what this is really about. Not cars, freedom, the quiet freedom of being able to get where you need to go, under your own power, without asking anyone for help, and without handing over money you were frightened you could not spare. If you have felt that quiet worry, the one that shows up when a parent goes silent in a car park, or when your own knees start protesting on the way out of a low seat, then you are exactly the kind of person this was made for. The kind who suspects, correctly, that a great deal of useful, money-saving, life-improving knowledge has been quietly buried, not because it stopped being true, but because somebody makes more money when you do not know it. Now I want to hear from you, and I want something specific, not just a thumbs up. Of the 6 I named, the Vitara, the EX35, the Sportage, the ASX, the Korando, and the Duster, which one surprised you the most, and which one would you actually go and sit in this weekend? And more than that, tell me this. When you go and try the dining chair test I just gave you, come back and tell me whether the car you already own passes or fails it. I genuinely want to know. Leave it in the comments below, and tell me where in the country you are watching from, because I love seeing just how far this reaches. And if you are the sort of person who would rather recover this kind of buried, practical, money-saving knowledge than be sold the shiny, expensive version of everything, then come along with the rest of us, because there is a growing crowd of us now who are done being talked down to and sold to. Subscribe and stay close, because the next thing I am pulling apart is the one insurance trick that quietly slashes premiums for drivers over 60, the one the comparison sites bury on page 4, and once you see it, you will wonder how much it has already cost you not to know. Before you go, if this video helped, there's a deeper version waiting for our members. You can ask me your own question and a real person answers, and you'll be among thousands of folks just like you. Point your phone's camera at the code on screen. It takes less than a minute and you can cancel anytime, no risk.